Why were we in Vietnam? It's a question that still haunts the American imagination. The French were there first, most people remember. But why were they there, and how did we take over? The new volume by Fredrik Logevall, Embers of War, The Fall of an Empire and the Making of America's Vietnam, gives the best overview yet of these questions. The canvas is large and the cast of characters is vast. Historian Logevall helps Canapé make sense of this epic, tragic story.
Vietnam became the American key to the security of Southeast Asia soon after the end of French colonial rule there in 1954. The country was split in half at the 17th parallel. The North fell under communist rule. The South was turned free.
I think that the Vietnam War looms very large on the landscape of 20th century history. It's arguably the longest and bloodiest war in the history of the world after 1945. And what I think that this book hopefully does, certainly what I try to do in the book, is to tell readers how the whole thing happened. How is it that we came to this place where we have two Western powers in succession try to defeat Vietnamese nationalism. In the process, we see the deaths of perhaps 4 million people, which is just a hard number to, I think, get at least my mind around. And why, of course, is it that both of those Western powers ultimately failed?
In the north, Ho Chi Minh, communist leader of North Vietnam, plays the kindly, smiling grandfather. But behind the smile is a mind which is planning a reign of terror in South Vietnam, in which children and adults alike will be the victims.
Ho Chi Minh is absolutely critical to the story that I tell in the book, and of course one of the giants of Vietnamese nationalism. And he became committed at an early age to trying to bring independence for his country, and became committed to that cause, but interestingly enough had a complex view of the French metropole and of France. And we see this when he goes to France and spends several years in France in a serious way, beginning right after World War I. Becomes active in terms of Vietnamese nationalism and in trying to bring that about from Paris, but also becomes very devoted to French culture and to the French language and to French literature. I think to the end of his life, Ho Chi Minh had this kind of contradictory view of the colonial oppressor. One of the themes in the book is that Ho Chi Minh believed for a very long time that the United States would be his ally in his quest for independence. He had spent time working in Boston. He had spent time in Brooklyn. So he had a first-hand experience with the United States, saw things that he liked in the United States, was also appalled, it seems, by the way that blacks were treated in American society, even half a century after the Civil War. And again, as with the French, he had a rather complex view of the United States and what it could bring. But I think what's striking is the degree to which he clung to this idea into the late 1940s. Some might say he realized much too late that he was naive, but he finally realized at that point that no, the Americans are going to be on the side of the French. I won't be able to count on the Americans. But for literally decades before that, he had thought that the United States, this country that had issued the Atlantic Charter, FDR, in 1940, which was espousing an anti-colonial message, that the Americans would be there for him. One of the things that really struck me in doing the research for this book was the degree to which the United States was a key player from a very early point. From the fall of France in 1940, where the first chapter opens with that fall of France, with de Gaulle going to London to give his address over BBC. From that moment, really, the United States is perceived by the French, by Vietnamese nationalists, really by all the players, as being a critical player, because people could see even then that whatever happens in Indochina, the Americans will have a lot to say about it.
No Den Dien, the son of a noble Mandarin family that turned Roman Catholic back in the 17th century. Dien came to power in 1955. His country had been split in two a year earlier, and with a multi-billion-dollar U.S. aid program, Diem built a powerful army as a bulwark against the communist guerrillas in the north. But trouble also came from within. February 27, 1962, rebel elements in Diem's own American-equipped Air Force attacked the palace in Saigon. It was unsuccessful, and the ruling family passed it off as isolated treason. Others said the revolt was widespread. President Diem took no chances. He moved into a new palace, guarded by his own private army.
And after FDR dies in the spring of 1945, at a very critical moment, his successor, Harry Truman, who has less interest in the colonial world and in French Indochina, in effect decides to turn a blind eye, if you will, to a French return. So the Americans in World War II, I think, and after, needless to say, are very important in terms of what they do, but also in terms of what they don't do. And so this country that was founded on anti-colonial, certainly founded in an anti-colonial reaction against the British, in effect becomes a partner of the French in this return.
I don't think that unless a greater effort is made by the government to win popular support, that the war can be won out there. In the final analysis, it's their war. They're the ones who have to win it or lose it. We can help them, we can give them equipment, we can send our men out there as advisors, but they have to win it, the people of Vietnam, against the communists. We're prepared to continue to assist them, but I don't think that the war can be won unless the people support the effort. And in my opinion, in the last 2 months, the government has gotten out of touch with the people. The repressions against the Buddhists, we felt, were very unwise. Now, all we can do is to make it very clear that we don't think this is the way to win.
Well, the book opens with John F. Kennedy's visit to Indochina in 1951. He's a young congressman. He's ailing. Nobody really knows how sick he really is. He almost dies later on the trip. But he's going on a trip really to bolster his credentials because he wants to run for the U.S. Senate the next year. So he comes with his sister Patricia and his brother Bobby to Saigon. And I discovered this in the Kennedy archives in Boston. And it was one of these eureka moments where I'm seeing the diary of both Bobby Kennedy and Jack Kennedy, in which they write about being in Saigon in September of 1951. And even then, in that diary, they're asking really penetrating questions about why are the French there? Can the French, in fact, hope to win? How is the West, as they put it, ever going to defeat revolutionary nationalism of this type? And so some really deep and profound questions are being posed by these two guys. Nobody knows then, of course, that one of them will later be President of the United States, will face his own difficult decisions about Vietnam. It was irresistible. I had to open the book with this.